Hi, welcome to my studio. I'm Barbara Swift and you're watching Be Swift Art. Today we're going to do a fall scene. We're going to do pumpkins, leaves, gourds. Here at this time it's October and the leaves are just starting to turn a little bit up north. But here in Florida they don't turn. So we have green all the time, which is good on its own, but you miss those fall colors, especially being from the north. So this is how I get through that. I just paint them, and I can see enough of them this way. So here's my painting. It's a gourd and a pumpkin and leaves. All the leaves are painted negative painting technique. The pumpkin and the gourd are wet on wet, and the background's wet on wet. So I'm going to show you how to do that negative painting technique, because I think that's one of the most important skills you can have as a watercolorist. It really helps you to define things and also create an atmospheric background in your paintings. There's so many uses for the negative painting as well as the wet on wet. So those are my two most important techniques. So the video is in two parts. So if you took my class and you just want to finish up your painting and you kind of got behind a little bit, this way you can watch the video and paint right along with me. So you're not going to miss a thing. But if you are a more advanced painter and you want to continue on and do more details, I'm going to show you how I did the leaves in the background and the little gold splatters on there. The gold splatters are by D Praise. It's a metallic watercolor. I got a little sample 6-pack set of them. And here it is here. And then in here it has 6 different colors. And you can see I like the gold one the best. And these are like individual pans that you can take out and replace if you want to. So yes, these are really nice. The most sparkliest watercolor set that I've bought so far. I've bought a few different ones to try and I've been really disappointed with them. So I did use one gold Daniel Smith before that I really liked. So that was probably a good line too. All the paints that I'm using today are Daniel Smith. I have cobalt blue, quinacridone gold, sap green, and tangerine orange. So those are only the 4 colors I use. That's all of them in this painting. And then I use the gold. So if you have the gold, you can add the splatters if you like them. I don't know if you can see them shimmering here in this painting or not, but that's what it did. Okay, so you ready to paint along with me? Leave me a comment and let me know if you had any troubles. You can always ask me questions and I'll get right back to you. All right, got your stuff out? Let's get started. I have my sketch all worked out here, and on the side I've cut out 2 little leaves, one smaller, one bigger, to trace around when I go to do the leaves on this painting. So I have a gourd over here and I have a pumpkin, and I've left a few spots empty where I can fit my little leaves in so that some of them are in front of the pumpkin and the gourd. So I'm going to be using my big brush here. It holds a lot of water and it's a number 14 round. And I'm just going to lay in some water. We're going to put a little bit of a floor in here. I'm just using the palest yellow, and I'm going all around here and there. Don't have to make it real solid, just to have some color in the background. And just kind of going really carefully around the gourd, so I don't want to get it wet or the pumpkin wet. So this is just for the background, and I want to do kind of a bit of a mottled background. So I'm just using, real pale color here. You can use any colors you like. So I have in here just a little bit of my Hansa yellow, deep with a lot of water. So it's mostly water. And I'm going to just kind of sprinkle in a little bit of sap green and see how that'll disperse, and put a little bit on my pumpkins as well. And just just kind of mush some of those bigger spots around so that it's all about the same mottled look. Using that big old brush. Yeah, sprinkle a few more on, a little bit more of that green in there. So somebody asked me how you do the sprinkles. All you do is get your paint wet. It has to be pretty liquidy, and you got to have a nice full brush full of the watered down paint. And then I will take it, dip it in the water just a bit real quick, and then flick it onto my painting. So fill your brush up with your watered down paint. Get the tip of the brush wet and then just flick it. You can flick it on your finger or on another brush, you know, to kind of make it come off the brush easier. So at this point, I'm just going to dry it with my blow dryer. Just get it all nice and dry. Feel it with the inside of your wrist. You can tell if it's still wet because it'll feel cool to the touch. And that's looking like it should be dry. All the little waves in the paper have flattened out. That's another way you can tell if it's dry or not. Okay, so now I'm going to take my little leaf cutouts and I'm going to just start turning them and placing them where I think they might look good. So I've got a pencil and I'm just going to take my leaf, place it in there, and just go around the outline. Make it easy. You can also draw individual leaves if you want. I'm trying to make it a little easy because I have a lot of beginners following me and they ask me questions and I don't want to get them lost. So we're doing kind of a step-by-step video here. These ones are longer than some of my other videos. Now I'm also flipping the leaf over so they're not all in the same direction. Some are pointing down, some are pointing out, some up. And I flip it over so that the tip of the leaf will curve either right or left, up and down. And first I'm placing my big leaves. You can put some small ones, mix them in also. So I have 4 of my big leaves. This will be number 5. I like to do things in odd numbers. This is number 5 of the big leaf. And that one's kind of behind the gourd, where the other's in front. So I guess we'll go for a couple more. I think some big leaves would be coming off of the pumpkin really close. Not the small ones so much because those would be the young leaves. I'm going to put number 6 over here. You can do as many as you want. If you just want to have 3, 2, whatever. I'm going to come back, so I'm going to add some more of those big leaves too. But I'm going to put some small ones in while I'm here to see how they're going to look. And the small ones will have stems and probably some little curly cues off of the vines. I'm kind of putting them out, not touching the pumpkin. And at this point, I don't want them to overlap. These are all going to be the ones that are in the forefront. They're going to have the most detail. Oh. Wanted to zoom in and I zoomed out, so. Now I have my little dish here that I'm going to put my selection of paint colors on. You can get these just at the Hobby Lobby or whatever craft store. And I got my number 8 Escoda round. Doesn't matter what kind, but I like it to have a nice point on it. I'm going to do some lines with this, so I am really wanting a round brush with a point as opposed to a flat brush. Could probably do the same thing with just the corner of the flat brush, but the round brush makes it easier if you have one. So this is my green. I mixed up all my greens on my big palette, and I'm not sure what color I ended up using here. I think it's Green Appetite Genuine and Quinacridone, I don't ever remember. Anyway, this is gold. Quin Gold, everybody calls it. Quin Gold. So I have that and some Indian Red, which is kind of a brownish orange red, brick red color. Nice fall color. Oh, got a little spot there. Okay, so now you can see that this paint is probably like a whole milk to heavy cream consistency. You can see it standing right up off of the paper. That's what you want. So I'm just drawing a line, and as it stands up, you know you have a lot of paint there to work with. So we're just going to spread it out, and I'm going to keep the inside of the leaf a crisp line, and I'm just going to blend and soften the other side of that line. So I have one side that's a hard line and one side that is a soft line, and that's the Quin. I just have water on my brush to spread it out, and I can spread it right onto the gourd. It won't matter, it'll look like a shadow. So I'm going to spread that out and up into my pumpkin. Naturally the light would reflect a little bit of color anyway, so. And then here I'm coming with that Indian Red, and I'm doing the same thing. So I'm using lots of colors. You could use just one color to make it simple, but I'm using the 3 colors and mixing and blending. This is the easy way to explain negative painting. So you have the negative, which is blank or just plain or light. So that is the inside of the leaf or the whole leaf. And the outside of the leaf is where we're painting, we're spreading the paint. So at this point, I just wanted to show my beginners a hard edge and a soft edge. I'll do another video on the negative painting where it'll show you the depth, where you can put more color on it and spread it out deeper into the background, and you'll have a lot more color on the background. And then when you come back with another layer of leaves, those leaves will all be that darker color that you spread out into the background. And then you can do another layer and it'll be even darker, and that'll show depth, so that the leaves in the forefront will be light and detailed and highlighted, and as they go layers by layers, they get drawn into the background of your painting. Very beautiful, beautiful painting effect. I wanted to keep it simple this time, just to kind of give you the basics of what we're doing, and then that's a variation that you can do. So negative painting only means painting around an object, leaving a negative space. It can be the inside or the outside of the leaf. Think about that. I'm just going to show you this today and let you practice this, and then once you figure that this was easy and you got it down, we'll do another video, and I'll show you how to make that depth, how to get that depth with the negative painting. Beautiful effect. There's a couple artists that I follow that have this just mastered. Marnie Ward is one of them. She's just phenomenal. And let's see, I can't think of Brenda Swanson. She's also equally phenomenal. And Jean Haynes is great. She does very abstract art and uses this negative painting to define just little parts of the painting, just to give you enough information so that you know what you're looking at, but it's not exactly all detailed. Very, very cool. So I'm going to continue on around my leaves, and you can't let that bead of paint that you're laying down dry too much before you start to spread it out, or it'll leave a stripe. So that's why I'm only doing like an inch and a half at a time, just working my way around. And I'm trying to work quickly so that all my wet on my wet, my wet paint, my wet areas on my paper will all blend and be soft. I don't want any hard lines at this point, except for the inside of these lines or leaves. So just kind of blend it all in and keep on blending, and you can go darker if you want. I'm just showing you the easy way at this point. And some people are more advanced and they will know how to handle their color a little bit better and how fast you have to work. So if you go darker in your background, you're going to have to work really, really fast, or you're going to see where you stop and where you pick up again. Just put a little bit of blue in there, just to give it a little shadow, because that's the bottom of my painting. So I want to give a little shadow for those gourds and a little bit of the leaves. I'm going to come back at the end and add a little bit more, so stay tuned for that. So I'm going to show you again here. So I have my paint is pretty thick, but it's watered down enough to where it can still spread. See how easily it spreads? And I just have water in my brush. So I lay that bead of paint down about 1 inch, 2 inches around the leaf. Rinse my brush off completely. Just take the damp brush, and then on the outer edge, I just put a little bit of water there and spread it out. And now I am spreading it up into the pumpkin. It's like a little shadow into the pumpkin. I'm getting that all kind of blended evenly because I don't want any lines in my pumpkin from my leaves either. So you can see that nice crisp inside edge and the very soft blurred outer edge. And that's negative painting. You'll use this technique in most all of your watercolor paintings. This is how you define things. This is how you get bold, crisp edges. This is how you add depth to your painting so things pop out in the foreground. It's an excellent technique to master. So you can keep on going after you do the simple part of this pumpkin gourd painting if you wish. Keep on practicing your negative painting and see what effects more layers will have. I'll show you how to do that at the end. I'm adding a little blue wherever I feel that there would be shadows. So if I pick a corner from where my light source will be, or if it'll be from the top, the bottom, the left, the right, I seem to like to pick the right. Don't know why, but the right side always seems to be where I have put my light. Every once in a while I'm conscious of that and I try to mix it up. So I'm just blending all of this out here. If you want, you can add more paint and blend it out, but work super quick. So you have to be very familiar to know how much time you're going to have there, which isn't a lot. So we can do this kind of outline effect, which makes it look kind of glowy. I think it's really pretty and soft. Just spreading it out a little. It's okay right here because it is a leaf that would be standing up off of the ground. So I can have that little dark edge around the bottom that looks like a shadow. And because I can do it faster, I did go probably about 3 inches there with that bead of paint. If you don't feel you're fast enough, just do it in 1 inch at a time. Just, take your time doing it. Allow yourself the time, because the more further you go, the faster you have to work. Because now see, that edge right there was starting to dry, and if I don't get in there real quick, I would have a line there. Now that little leaf is wet, so I'm going to go across my painting on the other side here and start where it's nice and dry. Otherwise that watercolor paint would go right into my leaf where I had it all wet. See how it kind of went around the edge where there's a point on the leaf? That's because I don't want to start another color right at the point. I think it looks better if you go around the edge and start another color on the inside. Just blending it out, blending it into my gourd. Now I'll start with another color here. This is my Quin Gold. And go around the edge. Get my brush rinsed off. This is just with water that I'm spreading my paint out. And just spreading it until it kind of blends into something else. The background somewhere, or the pumpkin, or maybe I'll have a little bit of a red tip on this one. Think about nature, think about the leaves that you've seen. And sometimes they have just all green and just one little edge of gold or red as they start to turn. Sometimes they're very blotchy, sometimes they're more solid. Now I really don't have enough paint there. I should have had more. Now see what happens when you don't add enough paint? You don't have much paint to spread out. And it doesn't leave that nice crisp line. It'll be much softer. So that's an effect you might want to have. So it all depends on how much paint you have and how much water. Now this one up here is still dry on the interior. So I will start over here and get that bead of paint going. There we go, that's a good one. And spreading it out. Now you can see as my leaf below it where I didn't put enough paint, it's just not defined at all. It's just getting very, very light as it dries, because watercolor is going to dry much lighter, like 20% lighter than what you put it on. You might hear my ice cubes in my cup there, I don't know. When you're doing a lot of talking, you gotta drink something, right? There's my little reddish, rusty colored tip on my leaf. And blending, blending, blending. Now as these colors cross over each other, it's giving my background a mottled look where it has a little bit more interest than one color. That's a good one right there. Nice amount of paint. So when I spread it out, it has enough paint to go farther beyond the leaf. Blend it up a little. Now, if you were going to do where I was saying about adding the depth in the background and you would put darker paint, you have to have more paint on it like that. So as you put it on, then I would get another brush full of paint and go beyond it. Instead of just water, I'd also use paint. I'm just blending it. Kind of waited a little long to come in there and see how my brush soaked up the paint instead of blending it out, and it made a lighter area there where I liked the darker, but it made a lighter one. It's okay, it goes with the rest of them. And I'm just blending as I see maybe some blooms forming where I don't want them. I'm just taking my brush with just barely anything on it and just blending, because this is all still nice and wet, as you can see. It kind of gives it that glowing effect. There, I can put a little bit more paint in there. That looks better to me. And let's see, where else is dry? This one's nice and dry here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Get quite a bit of paint on there. That's a good amount of paint. That's good right there. And it stands up off the paper. And I just come back with my damp, rinsed off brush. And you can see how much paint I still have to move around. A little shadow onto my gourd. Maybe put a little bit up in the top of the stem there. And I got this little area here that I'm going to let dry a bit because I got it kind of wet. I'm going to go on the other side. Get my Quin Gold. Blend it out to where maybe a shadow would be on my little gourd here. And then blending it into Nothing Land. At this point, if you wanted the depth, you'd put more paint on and go darker out to the edge. I'm going to just keep it around the leaf, keep it simple. There's my green. Put a little bit too much water on there. You can see how light it got. I'm going to try to come in and grab a little bit more of that paint as I'm going around that edge. Add a little bit of this red and that'll go into that area also. And we'll just kind of nudge it around and make it all blend together. Come back with my Quin. You want to use nice transparent colors. Some of them are a little bit more granular, where the actual minerals that are in the paint kind of float in the paint and it leaves like a texture. You could do that too. I think my green there is kind of like that. You can see when it dries, it has that little rough looking texture where it sets into the texture of the paper itself. It kind of sinks in. And that Quin seems very transparent to me, which is pretty. And also the Indian red. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Usually it'll say on the tube. Every time they switch the packaging, I gotta hunt for that information. I just kind of like to go from experience and just see how I like it. Blend it. It's still nice and wet. And up here is still dry on the inside. This one's better. This one's all the way dry. Let's start over here. So you're always skipping around your painting, finding the dry spots to work on. It's nice if you can leave all of your paint to dry naturally rather than using the blow dryer. What the blow dryer does, well, of course it dries it fast so you can keep on going, but also because it's drying it fast, the watercolor paint doesn't change anymore. So sometimes when you let it, dry naturally, that paper's got a lot of water in it. So your paint will, look what I did. That's no big deal. Anyway, so your paint will keep moving. As long as there's moisture, as long as there's water, the paint is still moving. It's still blending and softening out. So it's really beautiful to let it dry naturally and let the paint do its own thing. Sometimes we're in a hurry and we just want to dry it, or we're happy with how it is and we don't need it to move anymore, and you just dry it with the blow dryer. So to fix that little blob I did, I just came back with my dry my damp brush and just kind of blend it, because we're going to do some details inside the leaves also, so it doesn't matter that a little bit went into the leaves. I didn't really get enough on there. See, I don't have enough to blend it. Just a little, but you know, you still got quite a bit around the edge and not as much to blend. But I have that other leaf underneath it to still go, and that paint will go up into that area, so I'm going to leave that alone. And at this point I feel like I just want to get it done, but I need to pay attention to how much paint I'm putting on there. So I gotta get that thicker paint. It gets a little watered down as you keep going back into your puddle with your brush. So you gotta stop and mix a little bit more and get that right consistency. And it looks nice though, so we'll leave it alone. Get in there with the little edges in there between the pumpkin and the leaf. And now I'm touching that one, and it's got a little bit of water on the leaf part, so I'm just going to dry it just a bit on that one edge. It's just a little bit damp. The same with the one above it, so I'm just going to dry it with the dryer. Just that one leaf. Okay, feels dry. Mix me up a little bit more paint, because I still have a couple leaves to go. I'm just using these 3 colors. Actually, the whole painting, you know, we only use, I think, 4 colors. So we've got the blue, the Quin Gold, the Apatite Green Genuine, and the Indian Red. So that was the 4 colors we used. And they're all Daniel Smith colors. So I'll make sure that one edge on the bottom, I want to make sure that it got blended a little so I could come back and work on the top. And it can dry if it wants, because I blended it, you know, pretty much completely out. There's my green. I'm going to come back into those parts that I didn't feel like I left enough. So on the inside little loop there of that leaf. And kind of blend it, make it all look cohesive. Little Indian red on the tips. Little Quin. Isn't that a pretty color? I don't know why, I'm just in love with this color. For the longest time I never used it, and then I started using it, and now I'm just like, wow, this is the greatest color. It looks like golden sunshine and fall and gold nuggets, and just, I can use it for so many things. And this Green Apatite Genuine is pretty too. It's a beautiful natural green. Okay, come back in here, mop a little of that out. And blend it in. Okay, now I'm going to come back up to this leaf. It should be dry by now. See, that's a nice good amount of paint. That's what we need to do. So I'm glad I went back and mixed new paint into my tray there. I'm going to get better results. So like I said, I'm using my Daniel Smith tube watercolors. They I think come in the trays. I don't play around with the trays too much, only when I get a little set of something I ordered. But I've never used them and refilled them or bought new trays to pop in, or I don't have a palette like that. But I think pretty much they would be the same, I'm guessing. But you have to add water, of course. Well, you do when these ones dry up too. So, but out of the tube, this is nice and soft and easy to mix. And if you put just guessing about the amount you need, it's nicer to use, I think, than having to really re-wet them all and activate them again. But in my palette, that's how they all are. So I spray them all down a few minutes before I'm going to start painting, and start to get them so that they get more hydrated, and then they're easier to use. Okay, so there we have just all the leaves done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know, how many did I get in there? Did I get a nice odd number? Okay, so now we're going to paint the inside of the leaves. You could leave them just like this if you want. And I'm just going to use very light colors. If you want, you can draw your design in there first, but I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to let it be very free, loose style. I'm just putting the suggestion of the veins in the leaves here. So I just watered down my quin just enough so I can see it. And we're going to do a wet on wet effect here. Wet paint on wet paper. So I'm wetting the paper. My paints are wet in my palette. I'm just going to come and drop them in here and there. Let them spread on their own. Drop in a few colors and see what happens. So I can kind of coax them where I see I don't like, you know, the amount of paint there, or if it's too spider webby looking. A lot of times that will soften out as it dries. And how much white did I leave behind? I want to leave some white. I'm not going to draw it in there though. I want it to look very loose because this is not literal. You know, it's an interpretation. Drop in some color. A little bit of that red on the tips. And kind of coax it around. Get it all into the wet paint and see what I have. And I'm going to continue on. So I'm kind of drawing a vein to that point. For the most part, there's like a structure of main veins or ribs, if you want to call it, in the leaf. Well, they'll start at the stem, and there'll be a main one that goes all the way to the tip of the leaf, and then from the stem going out to the sides, and usually that goes to a tip of a leaf. And then there's these little side branches that come off here and there. We don't have to go too detailed with all of this. You can if you want. It would be gorgeous. You can see I'm just kind of trying to keep it loose. Leaving those white areas as kind of where the sun hits them. After it dries, I could go back and just do a wash over it if I think they're too white. But at this point, I'm going to leave them white and see how that looks. You might have to pivot. You know me. You gotta change your mind as you go, because my mind might say I want to do this and the paint will do its own thing. And you just have to appreciate that's the beauty of watercolor. There. So you can see how as they dry, they soften out on that right bottom edge. And there's my colors. So now I'm going to go around. All these are dry on the outsides. Everything is nice and dry. So I'm just going to add my quin watered down like skim milk. It's barely there. And I'm kind of working from that center stem and fanning it out from where I think the bottom of that leaf is behind the gourd. Dropping in my colors wet into wet. And I'm also moving them around a bit and making it a little bit more defined. Leaving those white areas, just the white of the watercolor paper. Leaving those dry. If you get it wet, all the paint will go together. You won't have those little veins in your leaves. doing one side and then I'm doing the other because the center has that white line going all the way to the top, so I don't have to worry about where my stopping point is because it's already there. Wherever you don't put water, the paint won't go. So that's kind of a blocker there. Until you put water there, the paint will just stop right at that point. Okay, coming off that main one from the bottom of the leaf out to the tip. And I'm going to put that Indian red on the very edge on the top. I like the colors that, like when the green mixes with the Indian red, you get that kind of warm brown color, very pretty. And the quin and the green makes that gorgeous harvest gold, just really pretty. And moving along, now we'll do some in the little leaves. And it has the same kind of effect. So one coming from the very bottom center of the leaf out to the tip. And then drop in those little extra colors. Little green. As you go around, you'll get faster because you know exactly what you're doing as you do a couple of them. You can work quicker. Just for reference, I do have this video sped up a bit, otherwise it would be like 8 or 9 hours long. So you know how long it takes me to do a painting. And this is 11 by 14, the paper. I'm using Arches 140 weight pound watercolor paper. So far Arches is my favorite. I've tried some other decent papers, but I still miss Arches. I love the way the paint flows and blends. That's my favorite thing about watercolor, so I need paper that'll do that. And the Arches is cotton paper. They've been in business for, I don't know, hundreds of years, I think, or 100 years. Anyway, a long time. And it's all nice paper. It absorbs a lot of water. It'll hold the water without too much distortion. I really like the 300 pound because it'll stay much flatter than the 140 pound. So if I'm doing a very wet on wet painting, that the whole painting is going to be wet the whole time I'm painting it, which is how I do like the loose florals. It's all with the amount of water that's on your painting. So it can get pretty wet. And I like to use the 300 pound for that, so that I can recover that flat paper again, because if it waves too much, even when it dries, you got a lot of waves in your paper and you have to flatten it out, you know, putting it under some heavy books or something heavy for a week or so and to get it all nice and flat again. And that's another reason why I tape my paper down all around the edges, is to keep it flat while I'm painting. Those loose florals, a lot of times I don't tape my paper down because I want to move it and let the paint run in a certain direction and bend the paper up so it all will pool in the middle, or, you know, different effects I'm looking. They're very abstract. And I want the paint just to move, so I like the 300 pound for that. I also like the bow hung paper and Fabriano Artistico, the nice paper too. So all the papers have different purposes, I'll say. But I learned on Arches, and Arches just remained my favorite. Might just be what you get used to. You do whatever you like. You don't have to do the same things that I do. And you don't have to use the same colors. I would love to see pictures of your paintings if you want to leave me pictures. Or you can also email them to me. It's bswiftart@gmail.com. I also have a watercolor group on Facebook. It's called Creative Watercolor Art Club. And I'd love for you to show me your paintings on that and show the group. They all would love to see them, and if you ask them questions, they will help answer them. I have some very experienced painters in that group, so it's really nice. Nice to be in a community of people that love to paint like you do. Just dropping in my colors, doing the same thing. And trying to keep it consistent as each leaf I paint all the way around. Try to keep the same look, not necessarily the same lines, but you know, the darkness of the paint, how much paint I put in there, how many lines. You want it to be cohesive. So there's a nice there we go, out of focus there for a second, but you can see that they all kind of are looking like they're all the same, but not the same, if that makes sense. So now I have these other 5 to go, so I'm going to just continue on. I grew up in Michigan. I think I might have told you that once or twice. But we had a cottage and in the woods when I was little, and my dad would go fishing and hunting and stuff up there. And I loved to go up to the cabin. It wasn't very big at all. I think it was, gosh, if I can remember, 2 bedrooms. And just very small, living room, kitchen, all, one little area, but I wouldn't even think it was 500 square feet. It was just a tiny little cabin in the woods. And we would go hiking in the woods, and my dad was a photographer, so he took his camera, and he'd always take really cool pictures of the pretty leaves and mushrooms and moss and animals and all the beautiful things that you see out there. I have a lot of fond fall memories, so fall is one of my favorite times of the year, except for when all the leaves fall off the trees. I mean, it's fun to play in them, even fun to rake them if there's not too many. But after that, it's just gone. There's just sticks. Sticks, there's no color left in the world, and I can't wait for spring. So I'll be walking around my yard, and, whenever the snow thaws, I'm looking for bulbs. I plant tulips and daffodils and crocus and hyacinths, and couldn't wait for those things to pop out of the ground and see some kind of life. It's just, winter is so long up in Michigan. So I love the spring. So I have to say spring's my very favorite time of year, but fall is right behind it. It's so pretty. We had a lot of cider mills, and they'd have crush the apples and make cider and donuts, and could buy Indian corn and sunflowers and bales of hay and corn stalks, and come home and decorate your house and all around for the season. And then my dog, we'd put all the hay bales all around his doghouse so he could be outside but still be warm. I had a collie. He'd come in sometimes too, but he would prefer to live outside with the cats. We had a lot of cats, a lot of stray cats, and they'd all sleep right on him in his fur, in his warm little doghouse. They all got along. It's amazing. So I'm mixing me up some fresh paint. Try to get that Same consistency. So the paint is, you know, like milk, not real heavy, but I'm putting it wet onto water, so it's going to be thinner. So I have to take in consideration the amount of water that I'm putting on the paper before I drop the paint in. So I'm using like a milk consistency where it's kind of in the middle. It's not heavy like melted ice cream or heavy cream like we used for the negative painting effect. It's got more water in it, so it's thinned out more, and I would say like whole milk. And then I'm dropping that whole milk into the wet water on the page there. So all my paint is very flowy, and it'll dry very soft and light. And I got a little bit much paint in that corner, but good thing it's on that bottom leaf where it might be darker anyway. I hope you have your paints out and you're painting along with me. The idea is to just stop the video and then catch up to me because I have it sped up. And when you get to that point, you can start it again. You can take as long as you want to work on your painting. I'll leave this video up. I just started watercolor painting maybe about 10 years ago. I had a wonderful teacher at the RV park we were staying at, and her name is Sharon Rapp. She's a beautiful watercolor painter, and she taught the whole park. We have a clubhouse there, and she would have it twice a week. We'd go and paint with her, and she might have 30 people in there. She had quite a full house. But we all painted together. It was so much fun. And then she went home for the summer, and I was still here in Florida. And at the time, I blew glass. I made jewelry out of glass beads. I made lots of big hollow beads, and it got really hot. I worked on a torch, and I had a kiln sitting next to me that's like at 930 degrees, and the torch and the melted glass is like 2,000 degrees, and it got hot in Florida, let me tell you. It was hot. So you have to wear protective glasses. They'd fall off my face just from all the heat. And I found myself just going inside the air conditioning and wanting to paint instead of working on my glass. So I would paint, and I'd get into these paintings, and I'd put that glass away for the whole summer and just got into painting. I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of weird looking paintings. I had these possessed owls, I call them. I still kept them just so I can see how much I've improved since then. The owl had babies, and I tried to paint them, and no, they looked terrible. But anyhow, I started to learn. The more and more I practiced, the more I learned how to paint. And by the time she came back in the fall, she was, really happy with my progress and thought I had come a long way. So that made me proud that my teacher, who I admired so much, liked anything that I did. So I was not able to take her class then because I got busy selling my jewelry at the art fairs and stuff all around Florida here, which is why we came to Florida from Michigan, because there's nothing in the winter in Michigan. There's just in the summertime, in the spring. So I didn't get back to my painting for a while, but I did it here and there, and she stopped giving classes, but she was kind enough to help us individually, and we would meet at the clubhouse once a week and bring our projects, whatever art projects you were working on, and she always came and she always helped us out and showed us new things. So I'm still in contact with her today. I don't stay at the RV park anymore. I got a little house, but I still see her and we still paint together. And, you know, there'll be a little group and we'll go do plein air painting outside in the little town here that I live in, and they live about 20 miles away. So we meet up in different places and then go to lunch. Gotta go to lunch. So we'll start in the morning until lunchtime, and then we'll go and have lunch together and talk about our paintings and show each other what we worked on. So lots of fun. Now I went out of the lines there, as you can see. I had a little bit too much water on my brush, and when I put it down on that edge, it just kind of pooled right over onto the dry painting. So gotta learn how much water to put in your brush, how much paint. That's the whole trick. Once you know that, I think you can do almost anything with watercolor anyway. I like my veins on that side there. Try not to mess them up too much. Sometimes you get that brush in motion and you just keep going and your brain goes, stop, don't do it, and you're still moving. You ever do that? Just listen to the music and paint. It's mesmerizing. Love to watch paint flow. You can see the difference between the dry leaf on the left and the wet leaf on the right. It dries much lighter. Just had my reminder go off on my phone. I'm recording my voice on my phone here, so sorry about that. And we just have this one last one to finish up, and it's a little one. Again, I got too much water. I'm just trying to spread it out and adjust. I ended up liking them with the more white in them, like these last two. Okay, so now I have all my leaves done. And that's the only amount of leaves that you need to put in. I'm going to show you extra steps at the end, so bear with me. Keep on watching. I appreciate that you watched till now. I really do. On YouTube, the longer people watch your video, the more YouTube likes it, so they'll share your video with people that didn't necessarily looked for your video in search. You know how you see those little boxes of kind of like suggested videos, so that's because a lot of people liked it. It was popular, so they share it, which helps your channel to grow. So I'm just putting water, leaving some areas white for highlights, just like I did in the leaves there. And I put water all over my pumpkin, and I left, you can see them now as I'm putting the paint in there, some white paper, dry paper, just a couple areas towards the top of the pumpkin so that there can be some highlights. And on those lines, I'm kind of defining those first and then just kind of putting some paint into the pumpkin as well. So I am using, this is the Indian red. So when it mixes with that quin, it is got an orange, more orange than it is. It is kind of orangey as it is. But it blends itself, mixes itself on the watercolor paper. Now that's my blue, that's just my shadows. So while it's wet, I'm just dropping in where the leaves are in front of the pumpkin a little bit. And I am using a little deeper concentration of my Indian red here. And I'm just kind of watching it move to see what it's going to do. Drop in a little bit more blue where I think more shadow should be. And now that blue with that red is making a purple. All by itself. Right on the paper. Be some shadows around the stem there. And I'm just kind of crisping up those edges. And now, as it sat there for a little bit, I can see what it's doing, and I'm just kind of softening it, blending it. I'm wanting to leave those grooves in the pumpkin a little darker. I want to leave the bottom of the pumpkin a little darker where it comes around, where it would be in shadow. And I'm trying to leave some light areas right at the top, right in there, leaving those a little bit light. And now I'm going to come back to this part of my pumpkin. Now this area might have a little bit of light on the very top of it, but the sides where it goes around will be darker because the shape of the pumpkin. I decided to go ahead and use a little bit of orange. It's mixed on its own with the quin and the Indian red, but I went ahead and dropped some in over here. And I'm thinking the rest of it's going to need a little bit more orange too, so I'll come back when I soften those highlighted areas. We'll put some orange in, I think. I'm just kind of getting my shadows, making sure my edges are nice and clean. So to do that, you saw me just do like a whole brush stroke down instead of little jabs of painting. So watch, when I try to make it smooth, I'll go. Oh, that's the background. No it isn't, that's the side of the pumpkin. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. Yes, okay, dropping in a little bit of orange. I want my clean lines, I just make a smooth stroke, see, like that. I'm not painting the stem. I'm coming back, Indian red. A little bit of blue in the shadow. And now I've got to blend it into the rest of my painting, and it's got a little too dark on me, so I just rinsed off my brush, dried it off a little bit, and just used it like a mop and soak up some of the paint. And now I kind of lost a little bit of my shadow, so I'm going to put that back in. But it was too much color in there and you couldn't see the other colors. They were all just too dark. Put some blue in there, and I have to blend that area right there. So my brush is rinsed off and patted dry. So it still has moisture in it, but it's not wet. I'm just going to get a bigger brush now. I like that cat's tongue brush. You see how it had a point just on the edge? And I'm just coming back with the brush damp, going over those white areas and softening them. So I'm mopping paint out and softening those areas at the same time. So I want to get that a little lighter on the top, because I'm going to come back and do a little glaze, which is a really thin paint. We'll do that in a little bit. Just mapping out some of those highlights where I kind of lost them, but it softens it all out, so it's more just like a satiny glow rather than a sharp highlight, like glass would have, let's say, with the light in there. So I don't want that. I want it soft. So now I'm kind of blending my colors up and giving them that curve to follow the lines of the pumpkin. Just playing around with it until it's what I want, until I like how it looks. You may want your pumpkin darker. You can do that. Okay, so now it has dried and settled a bit, so you can see how those highlights all turned out. And now I'm coming in with some of the orange. Like I said, I wanted it to be more orange. So in the groove, I kind of did it like the negative painting, where we just took the thicker paint, put it down, and blended it out. So there we go. But I'm not putting the bead because I want it to be soft. But that's where the paint is, and I'm just blending from that paint with my damp brush. It's not soaking wet. And I'm doing it on both sides. So there, I come down with my orange and soften it. Just with my damp brush, both sides. That'll give my pumpkin more orange color. Now I can go over the whole thing with a thin wash of orange. I might do that if it doesn't dry as orange as I want it to, but I kind of like all those purples and blues in there, even though it's not really natural. It's pretty, as long as it's pleasing. It could be a hot pink pumpkin. It's not natural, but some people love hot pink. Can't say that I'm not one of those people. I love hot pink. A little orange, a little more orange. I cannot pronounce this orange. I want to say Perini or something like that orange, but it Perini. Perinon? Something like that. It's a soft orange. I like the tangerine orange a lot. I'll put some blue back in that around that stem so it looks like it's sunk in. Give it some shape. And I'm just, so I don't get any blooms, I'm just feathering out those edges, wiping it on my paper towel, and just getting rid of some of that moisture. Okay, we let that one dry, and now we're going to do the gourd. The gourd's more simple because it's pretty much yellow, light yellow color, and it's got some splotches in it. So, not a pattern, they're just splotchy. And, I'm using the green kind of to define those lines in there, but I'm going to put a few little splotches with the quin and with the green. Draw my lines where they have little grooves. Some of them are smooth, so you wouldn't have to have any lines, just splotches and shadows. So just kind of splotchy, and I want to leave white where the highlights are. So you can see at the very curved top right around there, I think the light would shine there and it would be lighter, and also that bulgy area on the bottom, right in the center, right in there. I want to leave that a little bit lighter. So I'm not going to do too much details on my gourd. I want to keep him light. So the shadows, I'm using the green. So there'll be shadows behind the leaf, shadows at the top around the stem, shadows in the little lines down the sides there. I got a little bit of that quin, and it's mixing beautifully with that green. And as I get to the back of the gourd, it'll have less highlights. There'll be a little bit more shadow towards the back side of it, so that last section there will be a little bit darker, but I want it to blend with the section in front of it. But I think that's about all it needs. It doesn't need a whole lot. I'm just mixing up some paint, and I'm coming in here really watery with that green, and leaving some dry paper where I think there should be highlights. Just wet on wet. Getting a little bit darker, just a tiny bit on that edge, just because it's going to be going around the gourd, and I want it to look rounded. I want it to have the dimension, the shape. I want it to look like it's not flat. I want it to look rounded, so I have to add different colors, different shadows in there to make it look like it's doing that. Now that looks probably too much, so I'm just going to take my Viva paper towel and just blot it. I'm not rubbing it. If I rubbed it, it would smear the paint, so I'm just coming straight down, lifting straight up. And that kind of blended it more with the other side there. So I'm going to come down, do the same thing on this last section on the right. And this one's going to be a little darker, but it's got to still flow with the one in front of it. So get my shadows going here. And I've got my quin gold here. I'm using that. Mop it out, soften it up. There's not going to be a lot of highlights on this little section. And I'll match it on the other side. Now make sure your pumpkin's nice and dry, because when you touch this wet water onto the watercolor, it will spread if it's wet. So it's got to all be nice and dry. And we're coming around on this left side. It's going to be a little darker, and that very, very last section is going to be darkest. Green in there where the shadows would be. Dropped a little paint there, blend it in. And this is my very last section here. I'm going to quickly go by the pumpkin because it'll reactivate that paint and it will start to spread a little bit. I'm trying not to get the pumpkin wet, and I'm just going to go on the gourd. And I'm not worried about too many highlights. I don't think it would have many. Isn't it pretty though how the paint just starts to mix on its own? Right there in the middle. I think that's so beautiful. And there's a couple highlights maybe. I'm going to soften them out. Get my brush. Wipe out the same way I did. So the brush is damp, but I dried it on my paper towel so that it can soak up like a mop. And I'm using this cat's eye brush because it has a nice point on it. It lets me get in to the little tiny spaces. So see, I'm just softening out those highlights. And maybe there's one in the front there, but in the very back, I don't think so. And now I got my little round brush out. And I'm just going to do a few light splatters of that watered down green. And I put a paper towel there. If I put the paper towel there, then it doesn't get on the rest of the painting. It's hard to control splatters. I got some on my leaf, but I can blot it up. I'm using the smaller brush because I have more control. Smaller splatters, bigger brush, bigger splatters, and more wild they'll fly. So I'm just coming back in now with a little bit of the Quin gold and clean it up where I messed up there, where they went off onto their own. I just want them on the gourd at this point. So I'm just taking my wet brush, watering them down because they're still wet and there's hardly any paint in those splatters. So there we go. There's my splatters. And I'm just splattering on top of them some water. Just splattered on some water because some of them look a little bit too defined. So I'm softening them out with the tip of my round brush. I got some water on the paper here and there, especially where I needed to get that paint to start moving again. Got heavier water. See, and I'm just smooshing them around. So now my gourd looks different from my pumpkin, which is what I want. I want them to be light and spotted. Now he's a big gourd. You might make a birdhouse out of this kind of gourd. But those ones are smooth, aren't they? Yeah, they're smooth. I used to get those little gourds. I haven't done that in a while. And let them dry out, and then you can shake them like a rattle. Get them in the grocery store, all the different colors. I'd put them in a bowl and let them sit there all fall. Okay, so now I'm going to come up here and do the stem. Very simple. Got my Quin. And I just put a little bit in that little edge where it got picked off the vine. And I filled the whole thing in with the Quin. And now I'm going to put some shadow just at the edge of that vine there and on the one side, and let that blue kind of blend softly into the stem. There we go. Just kind of smooth it out and let it dry. We'll come back for some details. That's a little bit damp from where I splattered that water on the top there, so I wanted to get it dry. I don't need it to blend or move anymore, so take my blow dryer out and give it a good dry. So start on low, hot, but on low so it doesn't blow too hard and blow your paint all over your paint paper. And then once it's good and soaked into the paper, you can put it on high to finish drying it. Sometimes it takes a while because the paper can get pretty wet and it holds onto the water. Good for painting, bad for drying. Okay, we'll do the same thing with this stem. So I'm starting out with that Quin. I got a little bit of green in the brush, so I just let it be because it looks good. Now I'm going to add some green. So right around the bottom, I'm kind of defining those little scallops where the stem is attached to the gourd. Going to come right around in the curve because that's shadowy, and on the side as it goes around. Add a little bit more green, define the stem a little bit better. And now this side is dry, so I'm coming just with my green and just defining those little lines in the stem. And it's got a rough texture on that stem, so don't worry about making them real smooth. Let them be jagged and skip around a little bit. And dry that other one so I can do the same thing on it. Come back and put that little shadow in under the little nub. And we'll draw the stripes on this one. Draw the curly part first. That'll be the hardest part to do. So I like to do the hard parts first. And the same thing, I'm not making real straight lines. I'm kind of letting them skip and jag around a little bit. Come around, darken up that little tip where you got picked. And we're almost done. We're almost done. Come in here and draw little curly cues. The vines will have these little tendrils that curly cue into little spirals, and they're always fun. And draw with just using the very tippy tip of my brush. If you can't go around and make a nice smooth line, then use just the tip of the brush and do a half circle. So you got a half circle, then I come back around and finish that circle. And always have it touch something. And there's also going to be some usually coming from the stem. There's one or two. Some of them are like ringlets, really curly, curly, curly spirals like a spring. And some of them are just wavy and curl here and there. Do those little half circles. Might have to come back, put a little bit more paint in it while it's wet so it can move. Half circles. And you can add as many or as little as you want. You also need some stems. So some of them leaves have room for a stem. Some of them are tucked under the pumpkin so they wouldn't have a stem. You don't have to put a stem on every one of them. Your imagination will fill in the blanks. Okay, we're almost to the end. We're almost finished. Just filling in some of these curly cues on the other side. Put a stem in there and a curly cue coming from it. And we're getting really close. Going right over here. I'm just kind of looking over my painting and trying to make balance. I want it to be balanced. Doesn't have to be identical. In fact, it's better if it's not identical to the other side. But you want, it to feel, balanced so that both sides have something going on and not lopsided. Oh, look at that. We're getting there. A little bit more definition in these shadows on the bottom here because you can see how light they dried. And I had quite a bit of blue paint in there at one point. I'm just going to put a little bit more under the pumpkin and the gourd, just so it looks like it's grounded and not just floating around. Okay, so you could stop the video at this point and you have a beautiful painting. And I thank you for hanging on this long. I'm going to do another layer of leaves, and I'm going to do them so that they look like they are behind these other leaves. So I'm not outlining the whole leaf, just where it would be sticking out from behind, and I'm flipping it over and moving it in different directions so they don't all look the same. Maybe have to tilt it in a little bit different direction. I'm still using those cutouts from my watercolor paper, and I'm placing them here and there, but all of these leaves will be behind the first leaves that we painted, and we're going to repeat the same procedure. So now if we had painted the background darker as we went around and did all that negative painting, these leaves would be darker and they would look like they're further back. But for simplicity's sake, we didn't do that because I just want you to get the idea of the negative painting, because I've had people not grasp that concept at all. And I'm finding it hard to explain it to people, and it's so important that, you got to get it. So that's why I did it this way. But I'm going to go ahead and add more leaves to it, not overlapping. They're going underneath. So the top ones that we'd already painted are overlapping these new leaves that we're putting on now. But these new leaves that we're putting on now do not overlap the new leaves that we're putting on. So they're all going to be separate, just like we did in the beginning. And I'm just kind of giving it an overall look, putting some small ones here and there. How would they look the best without overlapping them, which is hard. You had to move it out a little bit more. And I'm just tucking them in here and there. I think it looks good if at least 2/3 of the leaf is showing. So I wouldn't want to just put a tip of a leaf there. You wouldn't really know what it was. And I don't really want it coming right off of another leaf. I'm tilting it in a different direction so that it's not pointed in the same direction as the leaf on top of it. But in nature, that could happen. It could all line up. So that's up to you. Whatever is pleasing to your eye. Get creative. Have a good time with this. Because this is just a great piece to practice. Practice this negative painting. So you just keep on going with it. And keep practicing it. And sometimes your painting has to be pretty ugly before it becomes beautiful. So I think sometimes the more you paint, the better looking it comes. To a point, I can take that back on a lot of occasions, I guess. Sometimes you don't know when to stop and you've ruined it. But something like this, we're going to add more depth, more layers. So that's always nicer to have more of that. Not muddying it up. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. Sometimes you can overwork your painting and it'll just not have that translucency that you love about watercolor. So it will look muddy because your colors are too mixed. You mixed it too much with your brush, even on the paper, or mixed your colors too much on your palette, and they end up being very dull. So I like them to mix on the paper whenever possible, if I don't have to mix a color, because I want it to be vibrant. I want those colors to really stand out, clear and true, so I don't mix too much. So it's beautiful when the colors overlap and they mix themselves. Keeps that true color. And you don't even have to go all the way around the leaf. I'm going to, because I don't want to confuse you. But you could leave some spots where the leaf isn't there, like it just kind of faded off into the background. I'm doing another layer exactly like we did the first layer, and we're going to come in and define these leaves a little bit, not as much as the first layer, because I want those first layer leaves to stand on their own and be defined more than the background. The other ones will be background leaves. And now when I'm blending these colors, I'm not going over the leaves we already painted. Just staying in the background. If you like doing this, try doing grapes. Grapes and grapevines. It's a really good one to practice your negative painting and getting that depth. So you would leave all the grapes in the foreground lighter, and then as you are spreading your paint out, you'll add more paint and make it darker, the whole page except for those grapes. And then you'd come back and do another layer. So now the second layer of grapes will be much darker than the first grapes, and they'll look like they're receding. And you do that again until you got, it's all very, very dark. And those back grapes will be dark and have a lot of depth to them. They'll look like they have a whole bunch of shading and stuff without you having to do that. You'll see the whole cluster of grapes. It'll be really cool. I put a little bit of blue in that part in between that one leaf because I have the blue on the background, and I'm going to continue that through the center of the painting. Just to add more interest. So where I have the blue down there, I'm going to outline with the blue. So you got your hard edge, which is the defined edge of the inside that's going against the leaf, and then your soft edge, which is what you're blending out into. I call it Neverland. It's blending it out until it's all blended. I use my little brush, get right in that little point there. Just a little section I left to paint. Whoa. Try to focus it here for you and get a little closer. A little out of focus, aren't I? There's autofocus on my camera, but for somehow, oh, there, that's better. I turned it off and can't figure out how to turn it on. It's all these computers, which I love, but I used to have a manual camera. I could work a lot better. Now see, I took the blue and the green and I ended it at the point there, and I didn't like that, so I'm just going to brush a little of that blue around that corner. And then I'm going to go blue up here because I'm trying to make like a little blue center in my painting. Blue and orange are good contrasting colors, so they'll make each other stand out in the gold. And That's why you put your paper on a board, so you can turn it all around in different directions, so it's easier for you to get to the areas you want to paint. Nice and dark. That would be good if I did it on the whole painting like that. That we're not, because we can keep it simple. So we'll blend it. And now I'm getting to this vine. Now, I normally would have added those vines last, but I wanted a stopping point for those who don't want to continue on. So I'm going to paint over my vines and then repaint them on. So they're going to wash out quite a bit as I'm blending over the top of them. But I'll be able to see them and still go back over them and paint them again. I'm blending that out. Got a little bloom going there. So I need to rinse out my brush really good and dry it off and smooth out that little bloom there at the very bottom. You can see it forming. Those form because the water is wetter, if that makes sense, than the water that's in the paper that's already dried. So you're dropping that wet water, think of it as being heavier water, onto that damp paper that has paint on it. So now the weight of that water pushes the paint underneath it out because it's still wet, so it can still move. So it'll push it away and it'll make a dark little ring edge, fuzzy edge around where that paper has dried up enough and the water on top has dried up enough that they are at a stopping point, and it'll push like a bank of paint, and that bank will stay there, and you'll have this little lines, little they call them blooms, kind of like a cloud of paint that'll make a ring around your painting. Sometimes it's a very beautiful effect, and sometimes it's distracting because it doesn't belong, and it, like on a face, I like to say, because on a face you don't normally have a big ring or a cloud floating around on your face. So if you're painting a face, you kind of don't want those blooms, but you can use them artistically in paintings. They're great in floral paintings because it looks like there's flowers in the background or something. Your imagination has to come into play there, but pretty cool. I like them. I make them on purpose a lot by just flicking water onto my damp paper that I just painted, and I'll get pretty blooms. Just trying to kind of blend in around my vine, but as I do, I'm taking some of that paint up, so I'm gonna have to come back and fix it. No problem. I already know that that's gonna happen. And smooth out that little place I went out of the lines. And I'll just come in with that Indian red. Make those pretty reds in the fall leaves. Get all the fall colors going on. Looking around the painting as it's drying, making sure I have things blended the way I want them. Put a little bit of my cobalt in here. That's quite a bit of cobalt, especially for this small area, so I'm going to be real careful. I try to spread it out. I don't mind the depth of the color, but a little hard to control when there's so much water in a small space. I'm just very carefully placing my paint, soaking up some of that water, moving it around, to a drier spot where I can offload a bit. And you can see it reactivated the paint underneath that stem area. There's a little bit of green coming through. I'm going to try to leave it alone, not move it too much, just as much as I have to. And I can always come back and redefine the stems and my curly cues and just kind of let it dry. And some of the gold is moving around now too. And you'd think, oh no, it's a big mess. Just let it dry. You can always come back and do something. So I'm trying to keep that blue area consistent. So this is also going to be blue, so that it matches the other side. So when I look at the painting overall, my eye finds balance in that blue. It's not just in one spot or really dark in one spot and light in other spots. I want it to be consistent, and I want it to be like I'm trying to do a big oval, imaginary oval over my painting, and the blue would be inside that oval. But soft, so it's not exactly an oval, but you can kind of see what I'm doing here. And I'm adding a little bit of depth again. So I'm using the blue and I'm using some of that green on this bottom leaf and underneath right there. There we go. Shadows would be there. And I'm just drawing in some of those veins now on the leaf itself. Got my blue. I'm doing it in the blue because this leaf should be in shadow, and then I got some green. And I'm not putting as much detail in this layer. Just a little suggestion. Oh, I'm going to make you dizzy. I'm sorry about that. We'll just... There we go. Slowly put it into focus. There we go. So here I'm going to just put a little bit of details into my leaf. Some of those little veins in the leaf. Just a couple light highlighted or white areas where those veins would be. Quinn. A little bit of Indian red, real soft. I want these leaves to be less defined. So that the ones in the foreground are the most defined. Make it soft. And I've got a leaf up here. So let's also have these vines in the way, those curly cues that I would have put on last, but you put yours on last if you go through this whole thing and you want to paint all these leaves on the background here. That'd be the best way to approach it. Put a little blue because there'll be some shadow there. I very rarely will use gray for shadows. Shadows usually a pure gray, but if you use the colors like a shadow from a tree on the grass, you use like a really dark kind of grade green, with green in it, it looks more natural than just gray on the grass. Because the grass is green underneath it, you're kind of picking up those background colors in your shadows. So I often will use purples and blues for shadows, because I paint a lot of flowers too, so they look really good with the flowers and the colors that are in the flowers. Lighting is like something I work on a lot, because I really admire those painters that almost have over exaggerated light. So for me, just to get highlights in my painting is a good thing. I mean, I love that I have some light and some highlights. It makes it alive. It brightens it up, makes it cheerful. I love that over exaggerated light effect though, and I have not been able to achieve it yet, because I can't stop fussing. I keep painting. So practice. I'm practicing that. So it's something I'm working on. Wonderful thing about being an artist is you never know everything. So you're always learning. It keeps it exciting. It keeps you interested. Keep trying new techniques, seeing what happens. My teacher Sharon used to say, what if? Ask yourself, what if? What if I put a little bit of blue in here? How will that look? Let's see. So go ahead and experiment. Not on your masterpiece, but experiment on the side little piece of paper, little scrap piece of paper. You can experiment with colors on there. See how things will look layered and blended. A lot of people will do several paintings before they'll do their final painting. So they'll start out with a sketch, and then they'll put it in black and white so you can see the value of the colors and see how dark do you need to go. Do you need to go almost black? Do you need to go really light gray? Do you need to leave a lot of white? And if you do it in black and white, you really learn that. So when you go to do your painting and you're doing it in the color, you know where your darks have to be. And then you can also layer on top of it. So you can do what they call glazes, which is just, really thin tinted water paint, that you can paint over like an entire leaf, let's say, and maybe in a gold. And then it will make the whole thing look more gold. Or like with my pumpkin, if I want it to be more orange, just paint a very thin wash of the orange over it, and it'll give the whole thing a little bit more orange. It's very subtle. It's another way, to experiment with your paintings to see what washes do. Little negative painting here and there will define things without grabbing your paint markers or watercolor pens or anything. You can do it with paint, with your paintbrush as you're painting. But I like to draw, so you'll see me draw on top of a lot of my paintings. I'm just continuing around with these leaves. Got a few more to go. But you can see they're less detailed, they're softer. I just don't want them to draw as much attention as the first leaves that we painted, but you don't want them to look too separate where they don't look cohesive with the painting. Just a little less detail does the trick. And that little bit of blue, it's light. You could really make it dark and dramatic, and those leaves and pumpkins will just pop out. They look gorgeous. But it's harder to do that, so I'm keeping it simple. I will throw in a few videos now and then that have a little bit more to them. Take me a little bit more time and get into them a little bit more than I do some of the other ones. I'm trying to teach techniques, little tips and techniques and tricks that different things do, like what negative painting does, what salt does, what cellophane does, all kinds of different things we can put. Alcohol, vodka. You can put vodka on your painting. There's all kinds of different things we can do that'll add different effects, different textures, different kinds of salt will add different textures. You can use, I'm just talking about salt real quick, you can use like margarita salt, which is big flaky salt, and it'll leave big starburst effect on, crystally starburst effect on your painting. And you can use kosher salt, which is a heavy salt, and it will leave more of a, like a dot in it, I guess, to, you know, where the crystal melts. And you can use table salt, which is really fine and delicate. The same with, you know, you can use rubbing alcohol or vodka, and it'll make a, almost like a bloom, but it's usually round. Experiment, just play with things. Use bubble wrap and stick that in your painting and pull it up and see what happens. It'll, when it dries, like lay it down, let it dry. You can put a little book on top of it so it really sticks to the paper good, and once it's dry you pull it up, you'll have that bubble pattern. Now what can you do with that? Now that would look really cool in a painting in the sea or an abstract painting. Watercolor is a little harder to figure out what to do abstract because you can't really paint lighter over the top of your watercolor, but adding a lot of textures, playing with a lot of things are great for abstract painting with watercolor. So I'm blending, and I'm trying to keep in mind that I want it to be soft, and I want it to be different than the leaf that sits on top of it. You know, a little bit lighter or a little bit darker or less detail. Something to set it apart from the one touching it. And I'm using the colors to kind of complement the ones in front. See, my Quin Gold is a little lighter than the one in front of it. And then I got another leaf down here to finish up. So I hope that you've been watching my videos, and I hope that you are picking up some techniques here and there from me, and I hope that you're enjoying them. If you are, and if you haven't yet, could you please press that subscribe button, because that is also going to help my YouTube channel to grow and let YouTube know that you're interested in it. And you have a notification bell that tells you when I post another video. I try to post one a week. I did go for the whole summer up north and I didn't get any out, so I'm back to it. And also the like button, just want YouTube to know that you like the video. That's it. I'm going for a third layer of leaves here. I'm going to try to kind of cluster them in, group them in together a little bit more tighter here. Just whatever you like, just turning them, twisting them till it's something that pleases the eye. And I'm going to do less leaves as I'm going outward. Because now these leaves, I'm not going to put any definition in. I'm just going to do the negative painting on them and let them kind of have that halo effect with no detail. But I think it looks better with more leaves on it. And now I'm doing a third layer, so to me it'll look even more better. Betterist. It'll look good. It'll look good. Yeah, I'll put one somewhere over here, I'm kind of filling in the gaps, trying to make it look like they're really nestled in a whole bunch of leaves. And don't forget to put both big and small. And again, these do not overlap the previous leaves. These are behind the previous leaves. Now, if you get really good, you could leave spaces to where, as you add leaves, you could tuck them in so that they go over the other leaves. But let's keep it simple. You kind of get the idea of it as you look that there's a lot of layers of leaves. That's all we're looking for. I don't want too many of those small ones all next to each other, and I got a leaf going both ways. I just need to tilt it in a different direction so it doesn't look carbon copy of the leaf next to it. Okay, let's let that one go off. And now we're going to come in and the same thing. We're going to do the negative painting all the way around. Blending it out into Neverland, Nowhere Land, whatever. Still using all my colors, my 3 colors that I did all the leaves with. So are you kind of getting the concept by now? I hope so. It's a really hard technique to teach somebody, I found. So I'm hoping that by not going too crazy with it, I'm just showing you how we can do the hard edge and the soft edge, that's gonna help you get the idea of what negative painting can do. It can define things. So after you're done with a whole painting, let's say, and let's say that you painted a flower, and now some of those leaves on your flower blended in to the rest of the flower and you wanted them to be more defined. So that's where, after your painting is dry, you'll come back in and just do a little bit of this negative painting, maybe just on one little tiny portion of that petal, or maybe you'll have to do the whole petal, or maybe you just have to do where it's, want it to lift it up so that there's a shadow underneath it and lighter on the top. So you can see how you can use your negative painting technique here and there in little spots to define your painting. So you can add depth with it, you can add definition with it, you can add more drama, more dramatic looks with your negative painting. So I thank you for watching my video this far. This is quite an investment in time, but I think that if you're painting along with me, I think that you're gonna grasp this concept beautifully, because there's a lot of it to practice. We've got lots of practice going on here. And my poor little brush is getting its work out, isn't it? That happens. You wear those little tips right off those beautiful brushes. But it takes me a year or two to go through a brush, so. Try to take care of my brushes the best I can. I rinse them out very well, and then I will dry them, and I'll shape the bristles back into the point and let them dry. I lay them down. I have a little dish that I lay them down on the dish and let the ends hang off so that they can dry nicely. It'd be really good to hang them from the handle so the brushes are towards the ground. If you dry them that way, that's the best, because the water doesn't get into the wood part of the handle of your brush, because when it does that, it rots and expands that wood, and your bristles start falling out on your painting while you're painting it. When that happens, I think the brush is only good for masking fluid. Don't paint with it anymore. Masking fluid ruins your brushes. So you use a junky brush that you don't care too much about. You get attached to your brushes though. It's funny. And you don't want to give it up. And then when you get a new one and it's all nice and springy and full of bristles, you're like, why did I wait so long? Paint with the best things you can. Make your paint area peaceful and happy, and surround yourself with things that you love to look at. I put my brushes in crystal vases and things that just make me happy, things that I don't really have another use for. I don't really use vases too often, and I have quite a few, and I inherited some from my mother that I love, and they remind me of Mom, and I don't want to tuck them away and never see them, so I'll use them in my studio. I'll put brushes in them, or sponges, or cotton, or the little pipettes, and colored pencils, and everything I want to use, my paint markers. I put them in my pretty handmade pottery coffee mugs that I broke the handle off of, which I do quite often. I finally figured out it's from being in the dish rack, and then my husband will grab something from the bottom and let the cups all fall on top of each other and the handles crack. And then you get a nice hot cup of coffee, and the weight from the coffee breaks the handle off in your lap. And there goes all your coffee. It's happened to me. And I'll blame my husband. Which he says everything I blame him on, but I think the same way. You know how that goes, right? So just keep going. I'm putting that blue in the center. So I'm using the same colors as the backgrounds around the thing. And I'm trying to go around the vines, but I am going to go back and paint them, but just so that they don't disappear completely and I know where they are. Blending it all in. And now my blue's getting a little bit darker because I'm putting another layer in. So wherever I don't do this, I have to go back and deepen up my blues throughout the painting. So keep that in mind. I'm kind of looking at the spots like that. On the other side, I want that to be just as same blue. I don't want it to be separate. So I'm going back in and adding the blue here while I'm thinking about it. And then now on the other side of the vine, it's much lighter. So I'm going to have to fill in there on the other side, right in there, and make sure that that blue blends and flows with the blue next to it. I want all my blues to flow one to the other. Just continuing around. Blending it into nowhere land. Taking my color cues from the colors that are underneath. Almost to the end. I've been into this metallic watercolor paint lately. and I really have been enjoying it. And what I'm going to do on this painting, which I don't think I show you in the end, but I did end up adding it, is I took splashes of gold watercolor paint and I covered up my pumpkins, and I did the splashes all around the outside, almost like a little halo of stars or something. But they blend in, the colors blend in with the gold, of course, but it just adds a little sheen when you turn a certain way. So a little bit of sparkle. So it's like jewelry. It's like the final touch. Put your jewelry on and pull it all together. So I put a little bit of sparkle on it. I didn't want to put too much on the pumpkins. I got a few little tiny ones just to make it all throughout the painting, but really put a lot more around the outside. So I just laid paper towels on the parts I didn't want my gold to go, and then I just splattered them on. I'm thinking, since this blue is higher up on the other side, I'm going to add blue right in here, but not too high. I'm going to soften it out and blend it into Nowhere Land. Little green. Don't want too much green because it's going to make that vine disappear. So I'm just softening it out around it. We're almost done. And it's a good thing because I have to go do my real job, which is gig worker. And one day watercolor painting will be my real job. I'm working towards that. So I teach my little classes, I do art fairs and YouTube, and I have Be Swift Art on Facebook and Instagram. And then the Creative Watercolor Art Club is for watercolor painters. And I would love for you to join that on Facebook if you want. But at this point, watercolor is still my hobby, and I want to get it to be where I can do it all the time because I love it that much. I hate to stop and have to go work somewhere. I just want to paint. It's so much fun. So I appreciate you staying with me this long. I really, really do. Let me know in the comments any techniques that you'd like to see, or you have any questions. I'd love to answer them. If you want me to play around with different materials, let me know. It gives me an excuse to get some new art supplies and get to experiment. I got one more over here I gotta do. Let's get it done. Lots of leaves. Gotta listen to the music and just enjoy the whole process here. looking at the painting overall at this point, and I just want to see what stands out. Like maybe I need to fix something. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that some of those leaves might be just a bit too light. So I just want to take a wash, a really thin, watery Quin Gold, and I'm just going to make it like kind of blotchy all over my leaves, just to soften them so that they're not too harsh, so that they kind of go with the other leaves that I've already painted in the other 2 layers. Blend it out a little bit in that corner. Sometimes I like to make the corners darker. It's like giving your painting a hug. Feels like it brings it into the center. Oh, I'm just taking on some of these where I feel need just a little bit of color. And you can see the wash is very light. You can hardly see it, but it will make a difference. Just very pale. Pale gold. Quin Gold. Gotta mix up a little more. Oh, I'm gonna dry it. Let's dry it. Get it all nice and dry, because I gotta paint those curlicues on there too, so they can't be wet. Where I gotta go over my curlicues, my little vines. I think it needs to be a little darker up here towards the center. So I'm just gonna put a wash. This is the Quin. A little wash of this over there and just kind of make it so that center doesn't stand out so much. And a little bit more on this corner also. Some of those areas where my paint dried a little blotchy, I think I had a little bloom there that I didn't want. I'm just re-wetting it and then glazing over it, soften that little edge that it makes out. Put a little bit of the orange, bring it through. Bring it around. And let it fade out. Now I'm going to take a little heavier consistency of paint, so like milk, and go over those curlicue vines because they got washed out from me going over them with water and scrubbing. Careful not to lean in it. You can also drop colors in your vines. You can put a little bit of blue in there, that would look good. So they don't look like they're just sitting on the top. And I got that one on the top that's almost all washed out. Can't forget that one. Come around here and fix these. These aren't too bad. There, I got the one on the top. It's all still kind of wet. But you can see my gold. Put a little bit of that. There's my paint. And I just got this off of Temu, and I've been using that one gold right there so much. DDD Praise is who makes them. And you can see how I just kind of splatter them on. Just a very few on the pumpkin itself. But I did that off camera, but I wanted you to see how much I put on there. Just a nice little sparkle, a little bit of jewelry. Oh, there, you can see it, metallic there. Love it. I love, love, love the glitter. All right. that's the finished painting. Thank you for staying with me this long. I appreciate it so much. And I hope that you got something out of it. And if you want to subscribe, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button. I appreciate it. There you go. So until we meet again, peace and love be with you always. Thank you. Bye-bye.